All right, Nathan, certified coach, Nathan, from the Carnivore Certification Program. Good to see you. You're here to answer, or to ask rather, some questions regarding some of the modules that I provided to the program, but also a few other things
Yep.
that I talk about either in my public spectacle or as well as in the program as well. May I ask kindly? Before we get into this, how are you enjoying the program and what parts do you enjoy the most of the program?
I I love the program as a whole. It's nice to finally see this information getting out there. I've just been up to this point, I've just been a stagehand that's watched a bunch of YouTube videos and done a bunch of research.
Hmm.
So it's when you try talking to people about it, you don't carry the authority behind it. You're just a person that knows videos.
Right.
Um, so being able to go through the program and get so many answers to so many questions, especially when it comes to the intricacies. I love the granular stuff. I love the
Hmm.
finite details, um, most of which came from your modules. And then Coach Peter's modules when it started dipping into supplements and uh, accruing clientele and sales and stuff, that's a whole new can of worms that I've never dove into. So that was quite interesting to get into.
Well, yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm someone that I like the granularities as well. It's something that I thrive within the nuance. So
Right.
I liked to I enjoyed bringing that to the forefront and actually getting into it. It was awesome of Coach Peter to allow me to do that for the program. I am eternally grateful for that. But yeah, okay, awesome. So. I guess it's not too much of a stretch to say that you would recommend other people to sign up to be a member as well.
Highly. I would
Like
highly
yes.
recommend
And I like
friends of mine that have explored carnivore before or explored ketogenic diets, and it's funny they don't take into account, and something that I learned in the program was we do years and sometimes decades damaging our bodies through oxalate loading, through lectins and these other plant toxins that cause our bodies become tolerant to it.
yeah.
And it wasn't until I transitioned to being carnivore I realized I never really felt good. I just felt less bad on
Yeah.
my good days.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I also like the point before we get into the questions, one more thing. I like the point that you made about, oh, well, if you watch a bunch of videos, you can have the same knowledge before or after you receive credentials, but you'll be
Mhm.
trusted if you actually have the paper next to your name. I've often said as a way of talking about this program, I say, as much as it is a fallacy to appeal to authority, it doesn't change the fact that most people are going to do exactly that. So you might as well make authority mean something. Which is basically the idea behind the program. We have to find ways to increase the supply
Mhm.
of coaches that actually know what they're talking about to compete with all the other coaches that, might online have like, a six pack to back up what they're saying, maybe. It's just it's a little it's more there's a lot of demand for more coaches like that, despite the fallacy being a fallacy, that being the appeal to authority. So I don't want people to I never want people to think that I'm being hypocritical when I denigrate the appeal to authority fallacy as being a fallacy while also saying, oh, become certified because it actually
Become an authority. Yeah.
yeah. Because it also, I mean, it also allows you to, you get to interact with medical professionals directly. I mean, it actually
Yeah.
allows you to be more efficacious in the first place. It's not even,
That was something that Coach Peter brought up, and when I took the verbal portion of my exam with him, that was something that an angle that I didn't think about was interacting directly with primary care physicians and interacting
uh-huh.
directly with chiropractors and nutritionists and your traditional authorities in the healthcare space.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's very useful, especially when you're taking on clientele that are having to deal with mixed signals,
Hmm.
from the
Yep.
medical professionals and then also other coaches. Um, but yeah, all right. Well, let's get into these questions. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to ask. I know there was a littor brief, introduction to what's to come, but I don't
Yeah,
know fully, so Yeah.
A lot of it, some of the I have some exploratory topics that maybe we could just go back and forth on.
Hmm.
Um, and I do have some questions. I wanted to ask you because I've binged your channel to for days. Um, but the Anthony Shafee brought up you say human nutrition science
Yeah.
is is almost impossible to control. You'd have to control every variable, which then you start stepping into ethics questions and whatnot.
I mean,
Um,
it really
he
just to interject just a minute, it's not almost impossible. It's
it,
impossible to do to do experiments that there's different types of science. You got experimental science and then you got some observational science, for example. This is a field of science that is not experimental. They pretend like
right,
it is, and that's the problem. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So there, Anthony Shafee spoke on two tribes, the Akuyu and the Maasai.
Hmm.
And these two tribes, the Akuyu was primarily plant-based as far as their nutrition goes, and the Maasai was primarily meat, blood, and dairy.
Yeah.
But their two tribes intermarried, so they went back and
Hmm.
forth.
Yeah.
Um, could that be considered the closest that we could feasibly come to a controlled study? Is there anything that we can withdraw from that that would be beneficial?
A control study with respect to simply the observation that they intermarry. I feel like I need more details on that. Like,
As far as them, as far as getting as close to we could to them being genotypically and or phenotypically similar enough to where we would be able to draw a theory onto which nutrition catered to differences in specifically their physical appearance. The Maasai was typically taller, they were typically stronger, they typically had better dental health.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, is there anything that we could extrapolate from these two intermarried tribes that would be, I don't want to say legitimate, but I guess kind of legitimate?
Well, it'd still be observational. I think I know what you're talking about. I think I maybe saw something because it sounds very familiar. Like very recently, I think I may have seen Anthony talking about how these two tribes intermarried, and I'm not sure of what the result was that he was talking about after they intermarried in terms of what happened to their offspring.
Mhm.
But yeah, when it comes to just observing intermarried um, tribes, I guess you could say, it would still be an observational analysis that you're conducting. Like, okay, for
Right,
example, if these two tribes intermarry, what is the result in terms of their offspring, for example? I would presume that that was what the primary outcome variable was, what they
yeah,
were observing was what happens to their offspring. Was it, were they more robust or did they actually lose robustness as a result of the Maasai intermarrying with a less robust society? However, I also need to know what the other tribe looked like at the outset, as
right.
compared to the Maasai. I would again presume that it was less robust than the other tribe if they were primarily plant-based. However, I don't know that for a fact. Um, but if that was the primary outcome variable, it would still be associative. Like, for example, you would put, okay, of intermarried tribal members,
Mhm,
of the tribal members that have intermarried, sort of
mhm.
x-axis, y-axis would be quality of offspring or something,
Right,
based on arbitrary metrics, but metrics nevertheless. And then it would be sort of you run a linear regression and find on a scatter plot and you find, okay, well, is there an association between, you know, um, poor health outcomes or poor health presentations as a result of,
right,
these people intermarrying?
right,
And if there is, well, then you might have something there to form an opinion based on.
right.
But it's still not exactly experimental. I mean, if you're going to run an experiment on human beings, this is the problem. I deride inferential statistics on a like into the dirt really on my channel. The problem is I am playing some sort of a character online. I'm not going to pretend like inferential statistics has no utility. It has utility in engineering, for example, but
Mhm,
particularly its utility depends on where it's being applied. So, for example, if your cases that you're studying, so but cases just refer to what you're studying. So in human nutrition science, your cases are your humans, like the people in the study.
mhm. 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 Mhm.
If your cases are identical in characteristics, if your cases are identical in characteristics, and they are subject to the same confounding variables, spurious variables, and those variables behave the same to a predictable degree, then you can perform inferential statistics and say, okay, based on this sample, we can extrapolate this result to an entire population of cases that we haven't
Right.
even studied. Okay, that's
Yeah.
the idea of inferential statistics. And there's actual math, it's based on mathematical proofs, like the central limit theorem. It's based on the law of large numbers. The problem is whenever you try and apply it to human nutrition science, where we have free will, we also have completely different genealogy. And it's not just with
Right.
respect to our genotype, what genes we actually are born with to work with. It's also dependent on how all of those genes are expressed. Because for every single genotype, there are millions effectively of different phenotypes.
Right.
Millions
Yeah.
depending on what you do, how you eat, and so
Yeah.
as soon as you try and employ inferential statistics to human nutrition science, which is seen in randomized controlled trials specifically, actually, you'll often see. I don't know how familiar you are with looking at the results tables on randomized controlled trials, but you'll often see in the results it'll give a result like the mean value for the random for the
Mm.
primary outcome variable, and then it'll
Right.
say 95% CI. Give a confidence interval, and then it'll give two values.
Yeah.
Okay, that is completely irresponsible to be doing because that is dependent on this idea that you can responsibly extrapolate a confidence interval. I'm not trying to get too complicated right off the bat. However, I want to explain exactly what it is. A confidence interval is an interval range, so it'll give two values, separated by a comma. That is the range. That is the interval range by which you are purported to have 95% confidence, or whatever the confidence level is. Sometimes it's 90%,
Right.
sometimes it's 99%, but typically it's 95%, by which you are purported to have 95% confidence that the actual population mean, the mean of the population, so you measured a sample mean, the mean of the
Hmm.
population will fall with
Right.
95% confidence. Like you're 95% confidence that this is where the mean will actually fall in the overall population. But that raises a question. What is the population? Well,
Right.
the population refers to a hypothetical population of people that share the exact same characteristics as the people that you studied in that study.
Hmm.
And that's the key. Like it's all semantical, but semantics are very important. I mean, that's like the essence of language is semantics. When someone
Right.
says the population, people immediately think, "Oh, you mean like all of human beings?" No, no, no. That's not what that refers to. That's referring to a hypothetical population that you did not study and you cannot extrapolate to. That doesn't even exist. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that you'll see. They'll try and pretend like it's experimental. But in order to perform an actual experiment in human nutrition science, you have to take two genetically identical twins, both
Hmm.
phenotypically and genotypically identical, and you have to separate them directly at birth so they've had no experience in life, none. They've just been
Right.
born.
Yep.
And then you have to control for every single variable, including the time they wake up, the time they go to bed, stress levels, hormone levels, etc. And then observe them over their entire lives if you're trying to inform upon lifelong health outcomes, 40 years for 40-year long health outcomes, etc. I mean, it's completely it's impossible. And that's oftentimes a criticism of the criticism. Did I cut out a bit, by the way? Did I cut out?
You did cut out. You froze for a second, but you're back now.
Okay. I was basically saying, yeah, 40 years for 40-year long health outcomes, et cetera, if you're trying to inform
Right.
on those lifespan, those lengths of time, it's completely implausible and it's impossible. And that's
Hmm.
oftentimes a criticism of that criticism. Well, that's not possible. That must be anti-scientific then. It's like, no, 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 no. It's respecting the fact that there are certain sciences that must be applied in certain areas and cannot
Hmm.
responsibly be applied in others. Okay, it's
Right.
not to say that, okay, don't do human nutrition science ever. No, it's to say, actually, if you're going to do it, report it responsibly and understand the limitations. What's anti-scientific is to say something like, this proves this causes this, or this raises your risk of this by blank percent. It's completely irresponsible.
Yep.
So, in terms of where that question started, which is, was that an actual experimental study? No, because there's many confounding variables that aren't controlled for. However, the relevant confounders, I will give credence to this, are quite minimal compared to other studies that are observational. I mean, really, what you're looking
Okay.
at is what happens when two tribal members, two groups, two tribes, they
Right.
intermarry and they have offspring, and
Yep.
you're looking at the result. But of course, even then, results of what the offspring look like and how they function and their robustness is still going to be dependent on many different confounders that aren't controlled for and can't be. But I will say, I
Okay.
mean, just the relevant ones by my estimation, they're a lot lower than other observational studies that try and look at like, oh, here's a group of like 200,000 people over the course of 40 years. Filling out food frequency questionnaires for every 4 years or every year, telling us what they, it's not the same thing. So I
Right.
will say that you just got to be careful with finding observational studies because I don't have any intrinsic sort of inherent prejudice against them. I just understand the limitations. I think
Yeah.
observational studies are fine because they are studies. Like if you're going to study something, go
Hmm.
ahead and do it. But you got to be careful with. I think it's best to try and mitigate the noise around the signal as much as possible. Find ones that don't have as much noise than.
Right.
So in
Yeah.
that case, there's
And
less noise.
and
Yeah.
and a lack of context when it comes to this observation of the Akuyu and the Maasai. How removed were they from the modern world? How many
Yeah.
generations had they been intermarried so that way you could see Maasai blooded children that were raised in the Akuyu and vice versa?
Yeah. Yeah.
For how many generations had that been happening? So,
Exactly. That,
yeah,
that's a good point
absolutely.
because that puts into well not question but it raises the important point of duration of studies matters too. A lot of people try and
Right.
extrapolate the results that they find in one sample, not only to an entire population, we already covered that, but also
Hmm.
if the study went on for 2 weeks, you can't extrapolate the results for longer than 2 weeks. So in a
Right.
longitudinal study, if they're looking at just one generation, well, that's one generation. You're not looking at
Right.
anything else except besides that. And it's not to deride the scientists. It's just to say that is a limitation. So you better be careful with how you report it because
Right.
that's your limitation. Like you have no choice.
Yeah.
So that also that's a good point, actually. A really good point. Yeah.
I wanted to. I've been getting a lot of questions from a lot. It's funny. After I got the certification, people's tone with me and the way that they listen to now the information that I have just completely changed overnight. It was spectacular. Um, I've been getting a lot of questions about women that are either pregnant and or breastfeeding, and specifically transitioning while pregnant or transitioning while breastfeeding
Uh-huh.
because um, I've told people it's not a weight loss. Carnivore, being carnivore and living carnivore lifestyle is not a weight loss diet. If anything, it's a weight optimization because
Yeah.
everything
Yes.
everything balances out and begins to regulate and everything works the way that it's supposed to. Um, my question was during this loss of weight due to improper nutrition and other variables, um, specifically with women breastfeeding. I mean, is there inevitably to no matter how small of a degree, are they at risk of lacking breast milk production in a transition, or would it just be a matter of stretching that transition out to make it minimally um, minimally traumatic on the system or minimize the withdrawals?
Yeah, as soon as we start talking about um more anomalous situations like pregnant women because as much as pregnancy isn't an anomaly, it's just the fact that most people when they're dealing with clients, they're not typically pregnant. It's an
Right.
outlier situation. It becomes a immediately more nuanced discussion. Um,
Right.
when it comes to people, pregnant women, I actually just received this question, I believe it was 2 days ago.
Okay.
And I had more time to sit on it too, which helps with my response here. Um, you immediately have to be more careful by my estimation. And I always I want to clarify that you know, I'm not, I haven't worked with pregnant women before, and I'm also not a certified carnivore coach,
Okay.
just to clarify that. But, immediately my brain immediately goes to the 6 to 8 week transition period. If they're
Hmm.
transitioning from a normal diet that they were on to a carnivore diet, may very well need to be extended. And not only may it need to be extended, if they are dealing with problems um, that are interfering with, for example, I mean, if they've already given birth and they're already producing breast milk for their children, and they're having problems with that,
Right.
I think that it would actually be in people's best interest to get to the maximum adaptation that they had gotten to with no problems
Hmm.
and maybe stay there for a bit before they go on to like because the thing is whether something is indicated or not, I use that word all the time. Whether
Yeah,
something's
yeah.
indicated or not is dependent solely on circumstances. Like, for example, anesthesia isn't indicated for me to have injected into my veins unless
Right.
I'm getting open heart surgery, and then it would be actually. So, like then
Yeah.
it would be. In this situation, I think it actually would be contraindicated to go
Hmm.
to deviate completely towards or to go completely towards carnivore, which is what's generally considered appropriate to be doing for, the majority of everyone well, for the people in our genome, right? Everyone in our genome.
Yep.
Um, in that situation, it's unfortunate that they're in that situation because, for example, I mean, if we're talking about breastfeeding, then they were probably eating their normal diet for maybe 6 or 7 months into their pregnancy before they even gave birth, right? And
Right.
it's unfortunate that they were on that diet to begin with. It would have been far more
Hmm.
fortunate if they were fully adapted already to a carnivorous ketogenic style approach. But since they weren't, I think it's best to actually stay to the deviation that they arrived at, that they actually finally progressed to,
Right.
that gave them no, or at the very least minimal problems before going further.
Right.
I think that's the best
Yep.
thing to do. Safety first, because it's not like if you tell that to someone that they have to remain that way forever. They don't have to.
Right.
It's just a
Yep.
pause because, you know, it could very well be the case that if they wait it out, they could actually their health status might look like this. It might deviate, it might dip a little bit, and then it
Hmm.
might go way up afterwards. But do you really want to take that chance if they're trying to breastfeed their child or if they're trying
Correct.
to have a successful pregnancy? I would say I would err on the side of caution in that respect, especially
Hmm.
when you're dealing with, I mean, more than one life in that situation. So
Right.
yeah, and
And
not just
if
more
you
than
were
one
fit,
life, not just more than one life, but lives that are with one life dependent on the other. You know,
yeah.
so.
And if you were feeling good before with minimal complications, regardless of what your diet was, if you're in that situation, I mean, it's the same thing as an alcoholic that goes through withdrawals. Like you get the shakes, your body goes through some level of
Mhm.
trauma. So instead of inducing that unnecessary type of stress onto your body, just stick with what works for now. And then when you're in a better position and you don't have this tiny life relying on you,
Mhm.
then start looking into that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd say. At the end of the day, it is just an
Yeah.
unfortunate situation because it is also technically still a risk that if they stay where they are, they could be causing some issues to themselves and maybe to the quality of their breast milk as well too. It's a bad situation. But at least
Right.
in this situation, what one approach will cause. Like you already seen it. So as
Hmm.
opposed to sort of dipping your toes in the ocean of chaos a little bit and just guessing and hoping that things will
Yeah.
go well if you just keep changing it throughout that escapade or whatever. So the
Right.
enterprise. So yeah.
Nice. Kind of in that same vein, what are your thoughts on carnivore for children? I mean, looking at every other species on the planet, as soon as it comes off of the mother's milk, it moves to the species appropriate
Hmm.
diet. So in in that in that thought process, wouldn't it be feasible that if we are as carnivores eating a species appropriate diet, as soon as the child is weaned off of mother's milk, moving towards scrambled eggs or pureed meat
Hmm.
or something of that sort? Do you see any complications, I guess would be a word for it with that?
Um, in my opinion, no. However, there is once again nuance here because humans are it's not to I don't want to lend credence to the idea that humans since they're different from other animals because we have the ability to reason and that's why we can communicate and all that, then therefore we're completely different in every respect and therefore we can just eat
Right.
whatever we want. I don't want to lend credence to that idea, but it is true. There's an element of truth to it that there is some slight difference, and the reason for that is because when it comes to like discussing what a species appropriate diet is for an organism, typically that's really, really easy to assess because you can observe it where they are. Like for example,
Mm.
there's certain animals that are exclusive to like one country. So they're basically all their
Right.
land. They only have one environment, one overall environment that they evolve under. Human beings
Hmm.
are different and have been for the last 13,000 years because ever since the Agrarian Revolution, this allowed for mass migration of human beings throughout to basically migrate to the entire world, like all across the
Right.
world. Our ubiquity is completely, it's far greater than any other animal. And so that does add
Mhm.
some potential nuance. I don't think that 13,000 years has been enough for us to have caused us to like require some carbohydrates, for example. Maybe one or
Right.
two people. It's hard to even tell if that's the case or not. Um,
Hmm.
it's hard to perform science at all that would even give us any answers on that. However, I do think that maybe there's slightly more variation in human beings than other animals would have with respect to, their range of deviation that is still considered appropriate dietarily. I think the humans might have a
Hmm.
wider range ever so slightly. So that's why I said in the beginning, I don't want to lend credence to the idea that it's all the way out here. Okay. Like, I don't think that's true at
Right.
all. But maybe there's
Yeah.
slight variation. Like, for example, dairy introduction or something like that. If there's a slight amount of
Hmm.
carbs from dairy, something like that. And the reason I bring this up is because there is some potential that if 13,000 years causes to have some slight variation, then maybe if someone's eating a diet that is not just a slight variation away from what they're supposed to be consuming, but is massive, which is what you see, which is really what you've seen in the last 100 years. um,
Right.
there is a potential that maybe the child won't adapt, it won't be fully tolerant to a 100% carnivore diet. However, I
Right.
don't think that it's a good idea to I think that it should at least remain within the 70-30 cutoff, which is the 70% animal products, 30% maybe other plant products. And the other thing,
Okay.
and again, I think 70-30 is the maximum range because the reason I'm using that range, it's not arbitrary. That's the cutoff by which an animal is considered carnivorous. If they're deriving
Hmm.
70% anthropologically
Okay.
of their food from animal source products, then that's
Right.
still a carnivore, even if the other 30% is plant-based. I think that's a cutoff for a hypercarnivore. I would do a stronger ratio, but I'm just giving a maximum cutoff.
Hmm.
But I would just be very slow with it. I mean, again, this is all my opinion. But
Right.
this is I think that I would go slow with it. I'd introduce, yes, some more easily digestible. I mean, I wouldn't be averse to giving children cooked meat. I know that that's a contentious topic nowadays. But I wouldn't be averse to doing that. And just as long as it's easy for them to chew, a pureer is perfectly fine. I think
Right.
that's you can't expect them to be able to chew a steak. But
Right.
if you just puree it, I think
Hmm.
that's fine. And then if you want to incorporate, because this is the great thing, if you decided to give them like 10 or 20% like plant-based products that aren't, by the way, I'm not talking about, highly processed plant-based products. There's no requirement. I would never do that to a developing child. But I'm talking like if they had like a small side of pureed sweet potato or something along with their meat,
Right.
something like that. Then the great thing is since they're so young, even if that is causing them a slight amount of damage, it's almost nothing
Hmm.
because they're so young that whenever they get old
Right.
enough, you can actually get even more experimental with them because they can learn to communicate whether it's giving them a problem or not.
Right.
And then so I think that again, erring on the side of caution is the best thing to do. But
Hmm.
I don't think that it's a horrible thing for a parent to be providing their child with a fully even 100% carnivorous diet. I'm just
Right.
giving a potential, okay, maybe this could happen because if you ate a really poor diet for your, speciation, it could have affected the way the child was born and therefore the way that they withstand certain stimuli that you provide them with um,
Hmm.
dietarily, even if it's only minor, because again, you're still the same species. It's not like if you just eat a
Right.
really bad diet for 20 years and then you have a
Yeah.
child after 20 years, they're vegetarian now. That's not how it works.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my opinion on it because I've thought about it too. I've thought about it too. Um, I think there's some leeway that you can have, but for the most part, no, I don't think that you should. I don't think it's or prudent. I don't think it's prudent to feed them a Western diet, a standard Western diet, because, well, it could be risky giving them carnivore diet. Well, it's risky giving them a Western diet, I think.
Hmm.
It's pretty risky,
Yeah.
letting them just eat all that
Absolutely.
junk. I think it's way better to do a carnivorous approach. Again, my opinion.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
gotta say that.
I know a lot of this. A lot of this is opinions and or recommendations in the way of this is what I would do if it was me. Like
Yes.
there's always that disclaimer that has to be thrown out there.
Yep.
because like you said, everybody's genotypically, phenotypically different. And all of this is
Hmm.
nuanced. So I know
Yes.
that a lot of this gets into the nitty gritty, and there's not a whole lot of research on it. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
it's challenging to speak on it with any level at all of conviction.
Hmm. Yeah, well, as long as we exhibit that element of humility, and as long as we say this is our opinion, this is what I would do if I
Right.
were in those circumstances, and then say, feel free to do that if you'd like. No one is pressuring you into one direction or the other. This is just what we believe. Then
Right.
there's really no problem with that. I mean, I think that there's too many people out there, whether they have credentials, like administered credence to them by an institution or
Yeah.
not. There's way too many people that put way too much bearing on their opinions as if they're factual. And I think
Right.
that it's really, really dangerous. Like, unless you are speaking of an unequivocal fact, like this table in front of me exists. Like, okay,
Hmm.
great. Okay, so I can say that that's a fact. But as soon as you start saying, like, what's the best protocol for this? It's like, well, uh, okay,
Right.
based on my opinions, based on what I've seen, based on my prejudices, even like,
Yep.
this is what I believe is appropriate. As long as you do that, I think that you're being responsible. Like, there's no problem with that. I don't even care if
Yep.
you say, well, in my opinion, I think that you should be vegetarian. I would disagree with your opinion, but like, as long as you say it's your opinion and you don't say, no, actually, the healthiest way of doing something is by being vegetarian. It's like, whoa, okay. Now you're gonna
Right.
now you're gonna be you're gonna be critiqued on my channel, you know?
Yep.
Like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And some of these online influencers, I have just died laughing watching you go through their stuff. I mean, since I turned carnivore, there have been a few influencers that even watching their channel, they'll start speaking on nutrition, and I'm watching their channel for fitness, and then they'll start speaking on it, and I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
nah, yeah. Um, and then to watch you go through specifically Mike Israetel, great resource for fitness and workout programs and focusing on eccentric and tempo, and it just
Mhm.
I think I I'm 41 years old, and I just started amateur powerlifting last year, and I haven't injured myself yet, and he's been one of my biggest go-to resources.
Mm.
um but there have been a few times he starts tapping into that nutrition domain, and
Yep.
it's like, oh no, just you're treading a thin line right now. Like, I'm listening to you, and there's not, no, I'm not
Yep.
buying
Yep.
it.
Yep. No, I know what you're talking about. Everyone has the tendency to believe that if they have authority in a given field and they've also proven themselves to be a source of veracity, of
Yep.
adequate veracity in that field, then they can extrapolate that veracity to other fields because they are in a position, a general position of authority.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's
Correct.
not, you got to be careful with that. You got to be very careful with that. Like, for example, I can tell you just as a practical example right now, I don't know anything hardly at all about specifically the best exercise protocols for hypertrophy, for example. I outsource
Okay.
my information from trusted individuals that I understand are to be trusted
Right.
um, about that. Um,
Yep.
when it comes to muscle energetics, like how a muscle fiber works, anaerobic versus aerobic thresholds, that is
Hmm.
where I actually do understand something, and I'll often talk about that, where I say, oh, glycogenolysis, you need that for muscle twitching, you need like the chemistry of the body. I understand that, and so I can
Right.
criticize points that they say like that if Mike were to say on that topic, but as soon as he starts talking about, oh, well, this study suggests that two sets of 8 to 10. I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I have to review that, and then I have to
Right.
I haven't put that into practice. I haven't like observed. I haven't taken on clients that have implemented those practices and seen what their results are. I have no idea. And so you always
Right.
have to just remember where your camp is, like what your there's a word I'm looking for and I can't think of it, but what your qualifications are, what siloed area they are in, and then
Hmm.
remember to exhibit humility when you try and speak upon anything outside of that little ring-fenced area. Um,
Correct.
and if you don't like the idea that you don't know too much about these areas that you're trying to talk about, well, then learn it. Because there's that,
Yep.
you can absolutely do that. Like, just learn it. I mean, if you even if you need help learning it, reach out to people that fully understand it, or
Yep.
and then that's really that's what it's about. I didn't understand biochemistry until I learned it. Like,
Right.
I didn't talk about it until I learned it too. So,
Hmm.
so,
Yep. So the yeah, that was something that was something my dad always raised me on, was he always told me, surround yourself with the best, especially if they're better than you, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
uh-huh.
So
Yep.
he raised me with that level of humility to be able to put my ego down, to not be afraid to tell somebody, you know what, I don't have that answer, but I'm really good at doing research and I could probably find it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And that's
Um,
it's one of the ultimate ironies actually with my videos. The way that I act in my videos, people would immediately think this guy's got a massive ego. But it's the a precise opposite. It's actually anger at people that have the egos.
right,
It's like, no, no, stop saying that. You don't know that. Like, f form an opinion. Everyone can have an opinion about anything, even stuff they don't know about. But
right,
like, just understand that you could be wrong and be lean forward, not backward. That's what I
yeah,
often say. Like,
yeah, that's
like
it.
go, yeah. So,
Yeah, while watching your videos, I watch you critique people, and then the first video that you had interviewed a coach on, and I watched it, and I looked at my girlfriend, and I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, this is a whole different Eddie than the person I'm watching doing these other ones.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, but it's no, it's awesome. So you answered a ton of things in your book, a ton of questions that I had, a ton of nuances. You answered a ton of stuff. So I'm kind of checking things off um to get in some more nitty gritty. Like I had a question about cholesterol and it being determined by the genes and the genes alone.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then our prescriptions of statins and other what is it, PK9 inhibitor or something like that.
CSK9 inhibitors. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Um, so what is what is the mechanism, without trying to go into too much detail, what is the mechanism behind the lowering of our cholesterol? Is it deprivation to a certain degree that our body can't create it?
Yeah, so it depends on which drug you're talking about. You've got PCSK9 inhibitors, you've got HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, you've got bile
Hmm.
salt sequestrants, you've got many different cholesterol-lowering medications. They all serve the ultimate ulterior motive, really, of getting the cholesterol, particularly your LDL, down.
Hmm.
It's going to somehow interfere with your natural biological processes to produce the cholesterol that the genes deem appropriate to have within the body at any
Right.
given instance in time. The ones that I'm familiar with, for example, HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, there's an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. Anything that ends in ACE, you can immediately assume is an enzyme. So you may have heard of
Okay.
like lactase. That's the
Hmm.
enzyme that breaks apart lactose into glucose and galactose for use, for example. So anything, salivary amylase, you may have heard of that
Right.
before. Yeah, so they're all
Yep.
enzymes. Well, this enzyme specifically is involved in basically, how do I put this to be as broad as possible? It's involved in cholesterol synthesis, but it's through specifically manipulation of one of the primary intermediates in biochemistry,
Hmm.
acetyl-CoA. So you've got acetyl-CoA in the body that is produced through the Krebs cycle, or well, not produced through the Krebs cycle, produced through other pathways like beta oxidation, glycolysis,
Hmm.
and then it enters. It's the primary starting substrate for the Krebs cycle. Basically, it's introduced into the Krebs cycle, but it has many different pathways that it can go through besides the Krebs cycle.
Right.
When it goes through, it can go through another pathway, and it's through it. This is involved in cholesterol synthesis, and one of the primary enzymes in that pathway is HMG-CoA reductase.
Hmm.
HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors do exactly what they say. They inhibit the enzyme. The
They
problem,
inhibit.
yeah, the problem is assuming that if you inhibit an enzyme that's involved in one pathway, that the enzyme
Hmm.
itself is only involved in one pathway. It's not. It's involved
Right.
in many other pathways. Particularly if you think of HMG-CoA reductase as like the top of a tree, or really
Hmm.
think of it as the top of a hierarchy, You've got multiple different, now you've got like a branch here and you've got three different pathways that's involved in it. And then these three pathways go through another set of pathways. And you've got a whole pyramid that you're interfering with whenever you interfere
Right.
with one pathway. Now, if you
Yeah.
have no other choice, like someone's going to die and you have to give them something like that, well, okay, great. But this is not a situation. They think this is a situation that thought process is valid in thinking, but it's not
Hmm.
because cholesterol, as you know, is not going to cause heart disease. So what they
Correct.
do is they inhibit this pathway, and one of the ways in which this drug works is when it inhibits that pathway, sure, it absolutely interferes with cholesterol synthesis. So actual endogenous synthesis of cholesterol is one of the things it interferes
Hmm.
with, but also your production of CoQ enzymes
Right.
in the body. So CoQ enzymes, they are a mobile transport. They're often called mobile transport proteins in your
Hmm.
electron transport chain in your mitochondria. Except they're not made of protein. Interestingly enough, it's actually one of the only enzymes that's not made of protein. So they're a mobile transport molecule, really.
Okay.
That, or it's basically it's involved in shuttling electrons through the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. The problem is that if you have any disruption in that chain, your ability to produce energy is going to be at the very least slowed. It's going to be inhibited.
Hmm.
You have enough of an inhibition, what's going to happen is the mitochondria are going to initiate apoptosis to the cell and it's going to die.
Good.
It's all spectrum. If you inhibit it slightly, it's not going to die, but if you
All right.
too
Yeah.
much, then it's going to give up, right?
Hmm.
What you'll often see is that there are associations with statin taking populations and what is it called? I think it's rhabdomyolysis.
Oh yeah. Rhabdo. Yep.
Yeah. And which
Uh,
is mainly characterized by too little muscle mass. Like you get muscle soreness and you also get a stripping of
mhm.
muscle mass off of the body.
Right.
Um, and well, I think that the mechanism, again, I'm very logically consistent. Association doesn't equal causation. But
Right.
if it's a causal relationship, if we're going to speculate, if we're going to assume that it is and perform some mechanistic speculation, I think the mechanism is very clear as to why that association exists, which is
Hmm.
that mito muscle cells are the most dense in mitochondria, like with the most dense. Your heart, for
Hmm.
example, every heart cell has between 5 to 8,000 mitochondria in one cell. It's got a lot
Wow.
in, yeah,
Okay.
a lot. And so you can imagine that if you have a drug that will inhibit the electron transport chain of every single mitochondrion in the body,
Hmm.
that the cells that require the most oxidative phosphorylation activity from the
Hmm.
mitochondria, they are going to be the ones to suffer the most, or even first, actually.
Right.
And so muscle cells very high energy demand, and so that makes total sense as to why that would happen. What else? Because again, I'm not gonna deviate too far away from what your question actually involves. You've got HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, and yes, it's involved in inhibiting that. Also, it seems that
Hmm.
it's involved in inhibiting myelin production as well, which is why
Right.
massive association as well between statin taking populations and ALS.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep, an invariably fatal condition.
This is actually another one of my questions is the myelination and the association between early onset of Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease.
I think that is,
Um,
I
I'm
think,
sorry, go ahead.
I think that is definitely a myelination problem because all of those are neurologically based. And myelin sheathing
Right.
does exactly what the name suggests, was to sheathe the neurons from any abrasions and any externalities, extrinsic factors that are going to pose a problem to it in terms of, damage to the,
Oh,
oh,
yep, there we go.
yeah,
Now we're back.
it cut out again, man. No, but I think that I think they're all neurological issues. They're all neurological conditions, and myelin sheathing
Hmm.
does exactly what the name suggests, which is sheathe the neurons from extrinsic factors that would abrade it in some way to interfere with its ability to regenerate the cells, for example. Um,
Right.
Something like that, something to that degree. I think that that's why. Again, I keep using that word, those words I think, because again, when it comes to
Yeah.
associations, but you gotta admit, it's a tough, an association of a relative increased incidence of in the thousands of percentage points is tough to ignore.
It is.
Quite tough to ignore. So
Yeah.
that's what I say about that. In terms of PCSK9 inhibitors, I'm actually not familiar with what they do. This is why I need to look into pharmacology a bit more. Um,
Okay.
I'm not familiar enough with them. Bile salt sequestrants, that makes sense. I mean, they're basically it's
Hmm.
bile salts themselves have cholesterol in them, And to
Hmm.
sequester something is to take something up. So I presume that the drug is going to take up bile salts themselves in order to prevent reabsorption of cholesterol. That's basically what I would
Gotcha.
presume is the case. Those I would actually think are less offensive to the system because they're not actively
Hmm.
interfering with genes in some way.
Right.
They're not actively throwing a wrench into the system. It's kind of like having acid reflux medications that just reduce the amount of stomach fluid you have. It's not going to be,
Right.
it's not going to be a good thing. You're going to be absorbing less nutrition and you could be raising your propensity for developing illnesses because you have less stomach acidity. But it's
Hmm.
not actively interfering with genes to the degree that HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors are, I think. So if you're going
Yeah.
to put them on a ranking system, I think that those are less offensive. But I mean, it's like what you said at the beginning. Less bad isn't great necessarily. Like it could be less offensive. It doesn't mean that you should be doing it. So um,
Right.
all of them, of course, they involve interfering to some extent with what the body wants to happen, though
Hmm.
what it deems to be appropriate. And that was what my claim was in the book, which is in isolation, the claim isn't enough to say that your cholesterol levels don't matter. That's why I went into further detail. But in isolation, it doesn't count. It's not applicable or sufficient. However, the claim itself is still true, which is whatever your cholesterol levels are, it's exactly what your body deems to be appropriate given the circumstances. So at least
Right.
you can always think of it that way. Your body is on your side; it's not against you.
Hmm.
It's actually a great way if someone's experiencing anxiety about something, always remind them that their body is serving them. So don't
Yes.
think that you're being attacked by your own body or addled or anything by
Right.
your own body. It's helping you. So
Hmm.
whatever your cholesterol level is, know that your body is doing what it's supposed to do. Now, once again, in isolation, you can't say that that's enough to say, oh, cholesterol doesn't matter. Then look into, okay, does it actually matter? Does this have any implications? And then you start learning in that, and it's like, okay, well, not
No.
exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been it's I think a quote by Alvin Tolley said the illiterate of the 21st century is not those who cannot read and write. It is those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Ah, yes. Yes, good. I like
And and
yeah.
and and this is, I mean, that quote, I run a private membership here in Las Vegas, and our principal philosophy is based around stoicism and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
being able to exercise humility while being knowledgeable, being able to respond and not react, and put space in between the stimulus and your actions.
Yep.
Um, and I've I've been carnivore based. I'm gonna say carnivore based because I haven't been 100% strict. Um,
Right.
but I turned into the nutrition guru of the founding members, and
Yeah.
but this is what I have a passion for. I love getting into the nitty gritty, and everything that you put out is right up my alley. Um, the I wanted to dive into, because I didn't learn this until just recently, that along with plant anti-nutrients, I found out that there are a few anti-nutrients in carnivore,
Mhm.
specifically in egg whites.
Yes. Yes.
Um, there's only three of them.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with them?
I'm not familiar with them by name, but I am familiar with
Okay,
them by their primary function. Um,
copy
I
that.
believe it's binding to biotin. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's a potential concern. I want to allow you to finish your question if you have any more of the question.
No, if you'd be interested in maybe me just running down the three of these.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the first one that you were referring to, I think actually all of them are binding. Avidin, it
Yeah,
leads
Avidin.
to it leads to a biotin deficiency, B7.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I have hash marked here because I'm not familiar with the term protease inhibitor.
Okay. So protease is just an enzyme involved in usually protein synthesis, I believe. It's
Okay.
either that or it's a breakdown of protein. But you know what? It's a
Right.
breakdown of protein. It's a breakdown of protein, not protein synthesis. Yeah, yeah. Proteases are involved in breaking down protein. So anything that is an inhibitor of that is going to be an inhibitor of an enzyme that is involved in breaking down proteins.
Okay. Gotcha. We have ovomucoid.
Okay.
It's a ovomucoid is a trypsin inhibitor and
Trypsin.
possibly other digestive enzymes.
Okay.
But basically a protein blocker.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
preventing the absorption to and a lot of this is my own logical deduction as we go through these based on what I've learned. And then ovostatin affects digestive enzymes, tryptin, chymotrypsin, slows protein breakdown. So all of these are affecting essentially the protein that your body can absorb.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, but whereas in plants you can't, it it's impossible or nearly impossible to cook out anti-nutrients in
Yep.
plants when it comes to lectins and all of those.
Lights and all that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, these three anti-nutrients that are only found in egg whites are extremely heat sensitive.
Yeah. I can,
Um,
yeah, I'll just tell you right now, whenever I was eating eggs, I was doing this thing where I was scrambling them and then I was putting a little bit of cheese in them. The problem was that if I cooked them fully, if you've ever made scrambled eggs, I mean, you know that if you cook them fully, they're more rubbery, and I didn't like that.
hmm
And so I
right,
would actually be half cooking them. And the only way that I could actually eat half cooked scrambled eggs was if the liquid portion that was still in the eggs was with cheese, because other than that,
okay,
otherwise I wouldn't have liked it.
right,
So what was happening was I was eating it and I thought I had a really bad dairy sensitivity because my nose would start running and my joints would
mm,
flare and I got like a really bad reaction actually. Now this doesn't have too much to do with digestive enzyme inhibitors. However, I can say that it still has something to do with eggs because at first I cut out the dairy and it still wasn't
hmm
fixing the issue until I fully cooked the eggs and I didn't have the
mm,
issue anymore. So I almost have
right,
a it's odd because you're talking about these anti-nutrients being, well, hence their name, anti-nutrients, digestive enzyme inhibitors, which
right,
wouldn't have any implication in joint flaring, right? So I don't know. I feel like there might be something else going on with egg whites too. I just know that if I cook egg whites fully, I do not have the issue. And so I've all
hmm,
like it's very interesting. It goes back to I was like, okay, well, does this make sense like evolutionarily? It kind of does because how often I say that eggs are okay to be eating, right? I think it's
hmm
appropriate. And people might think, well, that seems a little hypocritical because you always talk about what did our genes most evolve to withstand, right? They
hmm
didn't evolve to mainly withstand eggs, right? Yes, but also it goes a little deeper than that. It's not about the specific food. It comes down to the composition of the food. Is the
right,
composition of an egg, the fatty acid profile, the amino acid profile, congruous at least 95% to what
right,
meat is made up of, for example?
hmm
Well, yes, so I think it's okay to eat. However, it is true that that specific food and what else may be in it that isn't in red meat could still cause people issues if it's not mitigated by via cooking, for example. It
right.
actually still does make evolutionary sense. How often do we actually consume raw eggs? You know, maybe
I,
sometimes, but not completely, you know?
I think that's a valid point when you talk about when you talk about evolutionary adaptability to what we've eaten. How readily accessible was meat from ruminant animals versus
Versus eggs.
eggs?
Yeah,
How
exactly.
many times did you find a bird's nest to acquire a few eggs? And did you eat 3 or 4 eggs a day like that?
Yeah, right.
back
Yeah,
back when we didn't have mainstream farms and corporate chicken farms and everything, it wasn't feasible to eat 6 eggs a day, 10 eggs a day. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Like you would have come across
um,
it, once in a great while, and even then, would you have? The only time that I really would have, I would suppose that you would have consumed them was, perhaps you would have consumed them immediately and chosen that over ruminant meat because you never know when you were going to get your next meal. Sure, but I'm sure
true.
that you wouldn't have readily eaten them as compared to if you stumbled upon some honey, right? So I mean,
Right.
like
Yep.
that might influence how often we also consumed it, you know?
True
Oh,
story. Let's see. So, uh, phytoestrogens. I wanted to talk to you about
yeah.
phytoestrogens.
Okay.
because I had asked you in an email about the term soy boy. Um, and then
Yeah.
and then you referenced it in your book, and I'm at work on my break reading the book, and I audibly laughed out loud when I read that. It made me
Yeah,
giggle a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. Yeah.
Is and but in my own research, what I've gotten um mixed opinions, mixed results, as it were. Uh, but phytoestrogens increasing the messing with our hormone balance as far as testosterone and estrogen in men and women, but more significantly in men,
Hmm.
leading to possible symptoms, maybe not full blown gynecomastia, but
Yep.
maybe be symptomatic of that or have an onset. Is there any kind of legitimacy to that to a certain degree?
As soon as you start talking about mechanisms like biochemical mechanisms, you have to be very careful with not being reductionist.
Right.
So you can, for example, you can chemically observe that there are certain compounds in plants that will specifically interfere with the 17 beta estradiol receptor, which interferes with estrogen production rates and basically your all overall hormonal balance with respect to any
Mm-hmm.
hormonal ratio that involves estrogen in that ratio. Um,
Mm-hmm. Right.
but as soon as you identify a mechanism, this is typically how the scientific process, at least this is how it's supposed to go. Someone in cellular biology will identify that, like they just did. Okay, 17 beta
Right.
estradiol receptor is basically binded to or bound to, binded to,
Right.
by certain compounds in plants. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go, okay, well, maybe that has implications in, more effeminate presentations in men, not just physiologically, or not just physically, but also mentally, for example, like more
Right.
neuroticism, whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What they will then do is they go, okay, well, we need to test this on a broader basis because this is like if you went into a clock tower and you studied a certain gear in the clock tower and then you
Mm-hmm.
studied it really well and then you go, well, now I know how this whole thing works. You can't
No,
do that. You can't do that. So no matter how much that mechanism may reinforce some preconceived notions about reality, you always want to test it on a broad scale. So this is whenever it becomes incumbent upon you to perform like a randomized control trial, for example, where you will feed people
right.
like, you take a, intervention group and then a control group. And what you'll do, sometimes you'll do a randomized placebo-controlled trial or something like that, a double-blind trial, whatever it may be. You perform a trial like this, and then you feed them foods that have these compounds in them. And then over the duration of the study, you then observe certain outcome variables, certain metrics to assess whether or not this is actually substantiated by the broad evidence. And then further, you try and see how often it's able to be repeated on different subsets of the population. That's typically how it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to go. Um, I haven't specifically looked at the randomized controlled trials because despite the fact that that is what you're supposed to be doing in science, is performing, okay, well, okay, you've got a mechanism, let's try and see how it plays out on the broad scale. You know how I feel about randomized control trials.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with them. We already covered the problems in the beginning, but here is the ultimate, like this is actually genuinely funny. If you are to find that the results in the study seem to reinforce what your hypothesis was at the beginning, which is this causes estrogenic activity, like estrogenic phenomenon or phenomena in men.
Right.
Um, if you see that, you cannot draw a causal relationship between it being the thing that you were thinking about and then the actual result. It could have been something else that they were fed, multiple confounding variables, not whatever. But also, this is the funniest part. Even if you don't see the result you were looking for, like, oh, there were no statistically significant differences between the intervention group and the control group in any study that we conducted between estrogenic activity according to our arbitrary selection criteria. You also can't omit the possibility that it still does cause it.
Right.
Because just because
Yep.
it wasn't seen doesn't mean it doesn't cause it. It just means it wasn't seen. So then you realize that and you go, well, then what the hell are we even doing then? Like, why are we even doing this? So you can't
Yep.
even prove it. I mean, it's one thing to do these studies, and I think it's important to do it whenever you're talking about like pharmaceutical drugs and like if you're producing one, because it's all you have, it's all you got, right? Like that's literally all you can do. And in that case,
Right.
like, okay, well, do it. Like you'll never know the long-term effects of a drug until it's implemented into a population and they take it. Like no matter how
Yeah.
many experiments you do, they're not experiments. That's why. There's no
Mhm.
experimentation. It's just the closest approximation to an experimentation that you can actually do to get a drug passed.
Yep.
In the case of this, what I do is I go, okay, well, let's take a look at the average vegan presentation, and let's take an
Mhm.
average a look at the average carnivore presentation. Does one of
Right.
them look more masculine than the other? And I'm not even saying this facetiously. Like genuinely, okay, do they like what do they look like? Does the typical person, and this does get into a sort of fallacious area of thinking that just what you've encountered is all there is, which of course is not always the case. That's why observational studies are even done in the first place, because you can't just trust what you see specifically.
Right.
But if it's all you really have of any utility, and also communication with other people as to what they've encountered,
Hmm.
well, okay, does one of them look like they're suffering from more estrogenic activity than the other? Because if
Mm.
so, then perhaps that's the case. Perhaps there's implications with the phytoestrogens in plants. Typically, what I say is if we know that chemically it interacts with the 17 beta estradiol receptor, even on a reductionist scale, do you really
Hmm.
want to be messing around with that? Like,
No.
do you really want to be messing around with that? Because yeah, like even if it may or may not cause estrogenic activity, well, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I would rather not eat them, especially if you look at how often our genes withstood the introduction of that thing, at
Hmm.
least to the amount that we're sustaining it. Because sometimes we encountered some things that we probably shouldn't be, dealing with and withstanding ourselves, but it was
Yeah.
to a very slight degree, and so whatever. But you know, to the degree that we're seeing these phytoestrogens, which are
Right.
they do warrant the name because they do chemically interact with that transporter, like the, or
Hmm.
the receptor. Like I don't think that it's something that's smart to be toying with, and ultimately it does redound as always these things do. It redounds to a conversation of not in the political sense before I get in trouble, not in the political sense, but in the definitional sense of conservatism versus progressivism. Do you stick to
Hmm.
what is tried and true according to what every inference we have is, or do you take the risk of it being estrogenic or whatever the thing you're talking about is, like
Right.
it being something else? Because you think it might benefit you in some other way that can't be informed upon. Like, do you
Right.
just you take that risk, or do you stick to what's tried and true and what we've seen
Hmm.
highly associated with increased robustness, increased brain size, for example?
Hmm.
Like, this ultimately it comes down to that. You can have the opinion, you can be in the progressivism camp and say, well, I'll introduce some plants because maybe I think that it'll increase my lifespan by 5 years. Okay, fine, as long as you don't say that there's any science to prove that, because then we're going to have some problems. But
Yeah.
I'm in the conservative camp in this respect, which is, well, I would rather stick to what's tried and true, especially whenever you see that every single person that implements the diet, or at least the vast
Yeah.
majority, not every single person, of course, and there's nuance there too, but most people, every day I'm getting emails, every day I'm getting comments saying this diet saved
Hmm.
my life. Like this
Yeah.
is the best thing I've ever done for my health. Why would I say, well, maybe you're cutting 5 years off your lifespan?
Yep.
Maybe you should keep those
You're
plans.
right.
Like, no, it doesn't make any sense, like that's not, especially when the science that is trying to inform upon that is so faulty and filled with assumptions. And
Right.
if you know anything about assumptions when you're conducting science, one of the first things you learn is every single assumption that you base your result on or that your result is based on, every single assumption compounds. They don't add up, they multiply.
Hmm.
And it's like, so now you got a study that's built on dozens of assumptions. Well, get out of here. I
You're
don't want to
right.
look at that at all. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. My something that I saw personally when I started transitioning and made the transition to carnivore. Um, I lost 14 pounds. I continued to get stronger and build muscle mass, which you'll
Hmm.
find a lot of influencers saying that you can't do that. Like you have to do this bulk and cycle cut instead of a body recomposition. Um,
Yeah.
my
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
my my girlfriend, she's 50 years old. Her brain fog went away. Her her joint pain slash arthritis was gone.
Wow.
We reversed her pre-diabetes.
Wow.
She
It just,
lost
it just
17.
keeps coming. It just keeps coming, man. That's
Oh, this is wild. She lost 17 pounds, and when uh when she came off of her when she had come off of her birth control, she started showing patterns, or she started showing signs of female pattern baldness.
Mm.
Um, After coming off of her birth control, and after going carnivore, her hair grew back.
Huh.
And now it grows faster and thicker than it ever has in her entire life.
Wow.
Um, just it's oh, she came off of her Adderall medication for her ADHD.
Huh.
So the list is just
Wow.
wild.
That's amazing, actually.
Um,
That's
and her menstrual cycle came back. Um, just everything after doing initial research on carnivore for a few weeks. I was reading all this good stuff. And for the next 6 weeks, I actively Googled phrases like, what's wrong with the carnivore diet?
yeah,
And
yeah.
after I had, through my own research, kind of like your cholesterol module in the program, which is phenomenal. Um, After reading a proper research and seeing that the typical lipid hypothesis had basically been disproven,
Hmm.
the traditional lipid heart hypothesis, I could not find anything wrong with carnivore. I couldn't.
Yep. Yep.
Every argument that came from anybody else had been disproven, debunked. Just so beyond that, I was a believer. And
Hmm.
I do. And don't get me wrong, nobody's perfect. I've still got a little internal fat kid. I love ice cream and cookies
Yep. Yep.
sometimes.
Yep. 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 Yep.
You know, I know that I'm going to feel like absolute dog for the next 2 days. I know that,
Yep.
but I'm an adult and I make that decision and I step into it, and I enjoy that 30 minutes to an hour of just sugary, synthetic dairy bliss.
Yeah. 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 And until you don't.
Until you don't.
Yeah, I deal with the same thing. Yeah, I've got to. I mean, the only pro. I mean, it's okay to deviate once in a while. You never want to treat yourself like you're, subhuman or something. Like you're
Right.
unworthy. Your lack of, so, as much as I say that you shouldn't, there's always that voice in your head that says, "Oh my, what are you doing, dude? Like, what did you do?
Right.
You piece of like it's always that voice. Um,
Yes.
but so long as you understand that it's not appropriate, because there's people that they'll do it so often and they go, man, I just can't stop it. So it would be a lot easier for me to justify me doing it, wouldn't it? And then as long as you don't do that, as long as you don't like take that step, then you're fine. I think that
Yeah.
I think that personally, I think that Paul Saladino, not to, I don't want to turn this into a name dropping thing, but it's true. It's the first person that comes to mind. I have no evidence to support the claim, but I think that that was probably something he did. It was okay. Well, I'm having problems. I should introduce some carbohydrates for insulin response, which I always say sugar is a drug. It has physiological effects that can be of utility
Mm-hmm.
in certain circumstances. I've said this with respect
Yep.
to exercise too. Perhaps it can make you do more reps. There's some evidence to support that maybe that's the case when you're approaching failure. You could actually have a glucose gel and it'll get you to have 3 more reps. It's very
Mm-hmm.
interesting, actually. And there's mechanisms behind that, and I think they're pretty clear. But if you're going to pretend like, well, okay, let me just take a drug for the rest of my life and
Right.
increase the dosage as well over and over and over again because now I've found the study to justify my decision to do it. It's like, as long as you don't make that decision, as long as you don't overstep,
Yeah.
then I think it's fine. You just don't want to ever pretend like that is the new standard. Like, oh, if you have 20 grams of carbs a day, well, that's okay. Therefore, it's actually appropriate to be doing. It's like, no, don't make that.
Right.
Don't do that. Don't say that because then you shifted the goalpost because now someone's going to say the same thing about 40 grams If you make 20 grams
Hmm.
the new standard, and then it'll just devolve into however much you want. So as long as
Well,
that's not happening, then
and like you said, I mean, sugar is a drug. The same twinkly parts in your brain go off with sugar as it does with cocaine. They
to
they
potentially a greater degree too. Yeah, or if not
right.
the same, at
Yep.
least the same. Yeah, yeah,
And I've found myself, decided to treat myself, and then it was 48 hours later. I was like, ah, no, this is a little thing. And then it turned into 24 hours later. No, this is a
yep,
little thing.
yep.
And no, like legitimately, I would classify myself as a recovering sugar and carb addict.
Hmm. And that then that gets into a question of definitions. Are you recovering or are you always an addict deep down? And the
True.
fact that's something that I've always just called myself a carb addict because I will
Mm,
always be an addict no matter like it's not that I'm actively engaging in the addictive process or what the
hmm.
addiction leads to. I'm not engaging in that, but I'm still deep
Right.
down. I feel like I am an addict. I am.
Yeah,
That's
because how easy is it to reinitiate those cravings? How easy is it
yeah, yeah.
to slide back down that slope?
Mine's bad enough to where my I have basically instructed my fiance to
Uh-huh.
put everything that she eats because she's not as strict as me. Everything
Okay.
she eats goes into a lockbox in the fridge. I'm like,
Nice.
Dude, every single thing. I'm like, nope, nope, put it in there. Like I will look at it and I'll be like, you better put it in there because
Right.
in there tonight
Yeah.
I'm gonna go after it, and not only is it gonna make me not feel good afterwards, but also that's your money, and I'm just pissing it
Yeah.
away by drinking it or eating it or
Hmm.
whatever it is, like
Yep.
it's I take accountability for it. If I know that I can't control myself, because here's the thing, I can control. I never binge. That's my cutoff. I'm someone that as much as I'm an addict, I will never binge because there will be a part of me that says. No, I will not go further than this. Usually my cutoff naturally, there's an innate cutoff of like 50 grams of carbs or something. Like I can
Okay.
naturally, I will naturally go, no, no, no. There's no more than that. Usually I don't even reach 50 though. But it doesn't change the fact that I know that I shouldn't be doing it and I don't feel comfortable doing that. So what happens
Mm.
is if I even have 10 grams, I'm like, oh, today was, I'm not saying this is the healthiest thing. I'm not saying it's the healthiest thing, but I also admit, I'm not going to say, like I said, it's not healthy to accept it either. But
Hmm.
I'll always say, okay, today was unsuccessful in this regard. Like I still ate 10 grams and I know that I don't need it. And I know that it probably caused me issues because it's not just carbs we're talking about. Oftentimes it's in the form of like chocolate or almonds and it has
Yep.
oxalates and I have a joint issue and I will feel it in
Yep.
my joints. I
Yep.
will feel it in my joints. And I'm like I don't want to be doing that. And so it's unsuccessful. But the thing is if you can keep getting it down, a lot of times people will try something like two times or three times and they go, oh, well, they fail each time and they go,
Hmm.
well, I'm never trying that again. It's like, really? You're never going to try that ever again? Because
Yeah.
practice, you realize like you don't get good at something by doing it three times. You get good at something by doing it
Right.
50, 100 times maybe. Just keep
Yep.
at it. Like do not give. This is why I think it's important to have coaches because it's
Yep.
really hard for humans to hold themselves accountable. Some people are better at it than
Hmm.
others, but we have a very hard time treating ourselves the way that we would even treat our pets, for example, which really goes to
Right.
show like the the limitations of the human mind, that the faults of the human
Yep.
mind, like you will religiously provide your pet a medication if they require it. Um,
Hmm.
but you won't do it to yourself. You won't do it for yourself.
Right.
Why, but if someone else tells you to, and it's easier to make the step of getting someone to tell you it, like actually recruiting a coach and paying for one to help you,
Hmm.
than it is to get yourself to tell yourself, to
Right.
actually keep yourself in check. So I think that's another role. It's a very, very critical role of coaches. Like even if they're just the voice, the encouraging voice, the ambitious voice that tells you, no, 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 you can do it, and I will
Hmm.
be the one to hold you accountable. You can trust me to do that. It makes people
Yep.
immediately like, oh, if I eat this cookie today, I'm not the only one that I'm not the one to actually see myself doing it. Now I have to
Right.
like the next day on my next call tell them, oh, I ate the cookie. Like there's different layer there, and it's important. Like it holds you
Yeah.
accountable. Like they will tell you
Yep.
like and it's not to say that the coach should denigrate you or like lambast you for it. That's not.
Right.
It's got to be
Yep.
constructive, not destructive.
Hmm.
But they still serve as the constructive voice. Like they serve as the healthy
Right.
criticism. No criticism is unhealthy, completely unhealthy.
Yep.
Like it's an enabler mindset
Yeah.
or approach, and that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's an often undervalued value that coaches
Yeah.
provide. So yeah, when it comes to addiction, addiction is a very real thing. Carbohydrate
Yeah.
addiction, I think that we really need a paradigm shift. It's already happening somewhat, but we really need a paradigm shift when it comes to sugar, not treating it as a macronutrient because even definitionally speaking, it's not a nutrient. But
Right.
yeah, but speaking of it as a drug, and that's not to
Hmm.
say that it therefore should never be used and never be touched. Drugs have certain indications in performance, for example, depending on your goals.
Hmm.
In smaller amounts than is often advocated for or promoted, much smaller,
Yeah.
actually, it seems. But and also even for aesthetic purposes, I know that Dr. John Jaquish, maybe you're aware of who he is, inventor of X3 bar. You ever heard of that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I knew I cut out. I knew I was waiting for you to come.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. The inventor of the X3 bar. He will actually before a photo shoot hold carb load with white rice
Hmm.
because it inflates his muscles. It's like yeah,
Right.
depending on what your goals are, you can do that. Like that's the idea. But you don't. I don't think it's a good idea. Like you don't want to encourage it to like you don't need to do that, and nor is it
Right.
really appropriate to be doing for your health. Like it's always a trade-off with your health. Like you really, if you want
Yep.
to do it, here's what it can do for you. But I'm not going to say
Hmm.
that it's appropriate to be doing. I'm not going to encourage it. You could do like it has certain indications depending on the circumstance. But with sugar, the interesting
Yeah.
thing about the drug sugar, the drug that is sugar, is that the indication levels are actually uh, they're quite limited as compared to other drugs, actually. Very limited.
Yeah.
Like, well, like, and so I think, yeah, there needs to be a massive paradigm shift when it comes to sugar. It needs to be considered an addictive drug. It really does.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like what you said about it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I just watched a video of yours the other day, um, where and it was another podcast you were doing a reaction to. It was the guy that said he got too lean on carnivore.
Tristan Lee. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. And then they started dipping into the realm of bodybuilding and
Hmm.
that obtaining that physique, and yeah, I believe that there's a purpose for everything. Is it optimal? I don't think anybody thinks that these mass monsters that are
Hmm.
bodybuilders obtain optimal health.
Yeah, no,
They
that's not the
they
goal. Yeah.
they literally kill themselves to obtain this enormous physique or this beautiful super lean physique. I mean, this bulking and cutting, this cycling that you do to your body, like that's that can't be healthy in the first place. I know that living below a 10% body fat for the most part, your visceral fat gets so low that it just becomes unhealthy to a certain degree where your body's not functioning optimally. Maybe unhealthy is the wrong word, but functioning optimally is is kind of a stretch
Yep.
when it comes to you guys.
Yeah, depending, like I said, the specific thing I said in the video was depending on the circumstances, two negatives can make a positive, but you have to really look at what
Right.
you're doing. Like, do you actually want to do this or because you're like, if you're going to deviate away from what our genes most evolved to withstand or most evolved to express themselves as
Hmm.
genotypically, then you may very
Yeah.
well need to consume something that deviates away from
Yes.
that proportionally to
Yep.
attain it. Well, it would make sense
Hmm.
anyway. But it doesn't mean that for the general population they should be consuming carbohydrates. Like that's kind of what the video that I was reacting to was marketed for. It seemed like it was like, oh, Tristan Lee quit the carnivore diet because it made him too lean. There's almost implications there that if you're marketing it to a bunch of other people without the explicit statement otherwise, that oh, well,
Right.
maybe you shouldn't be doing carnivore if you're an average Joe because you might get too lean. It's like, well, no, 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 no. This is a completely different demographic of
Right.
people we're talking about. This is a completely different demographic of people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said with the studies, like it's terrible for him to throw out a blanket statement like that because there's no we need more context. What were you eating? How
Yeah.
much meat were you eating? How many eggs were you eating? How much fat
Yep.
were you taking in?
Yep.
What was your protein? Like, what was your exertion at the gym? How many hours a
Hmm.
day were you spending under physical load? How was your sleep? Did your sleep diminish, or
Yeah.
were you working yourself into the ground while going to the gym 4 hours a day and only getting 4 hours of sleep a night? You know,
Yep.
there's too many variables in there to throw out a blanket statement, to even put out a tone like I got too lean on carnivore and this and that. It's like, no, you got to give us the whole picture when it comes to
Oh,
that.
yeah, exactly. And it's in a way it's unrealistic to pretend like or to believe that someone can always remember the full picture, of course. However, if you
Right.
don't have the full picture, you just got to be careful with making blanket statements. Basically, that's basically your point. And that's why I actually had no problem with Tristan Lee at all. He just gave it, he was just telling his experience and I was like, okay,
Yep.
cool. Like whatever. It was and even
Yeah.
Thomas during the interview, I didn't have a problem with until the very end when he was immediately he clearly got very passionate and was then just making claims about it's not the carbohydrates that are causing illness. It's no influence at all. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
well, no. Again, now we're going down it took over an hour and eventually he finally got to the point where he said like, I think I said, I was like, now we've gotten to the falsehood territory. Now we've gotten to
Right.
the transgression.
The real convicting statements.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah. Right.
calories, calories. That's a whole separate discussion for another day, but
That is a whole separate discussion. Um, so real quick, just a couple anecdotal things
Mhm.
that I want. Oh, first of all, in the module, you guys reference in the program, you guys reference grounding. I think you're the first um, curriculum like this that I've ever heard grounding referenced. And then
Yeah.
when you went into the science of it, I had heard of it before and I had dabbled, but it's one of those where you feel like maybe you're not seeing the wow effect that that you would that you some people might expect.
Uh-huh.
Um
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I love that you and Coach Peter talked about it in the program and has opened another rabbit hole for me to dive down and do some more research on.
Yeah. Yeah, that starts to deviate slightly away from what my main expertises are. However, I know a little bit
Hmm.
about it, and it's something that I want to dig deeper into too. But all I can say is whenever you're grounding, you're not going to have any immediate like, it's not like whenever you touch the ground or a grounding mat, you're going to be like, like you just feel like you're lighting up.
Right.
That's not how it works. So what I can say is that, it's definitely not doing me any problems. And I know that in
Right.
studies that I've seen, you will literally see within like no time at all, you will see on a live blood analysis, the
Hmm.
blood become thinner immediately after contact to the ground.
Huh.
It's
Okay.
really, real like the viscosity goes down because you're talking about
Right.
electrons, the speed of electrons. I mean, you're talking very fast, and they form a mutually repellent layer of electrons by sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of they sort of encompass the red blood cells, and the red blood cells form
Uh-huh.
a repellent layer of electrons because of their charges, and it prevents them
Okay.
from clumping and sticking. So you can actually help with. It seems like you can very well help with blood viscosity, hypertension, maybe if you have something like that, and also inflammation. Because the thing is oxidation itself is the loss of electrons.
Right.
So reduction is just the gain of them. And if you're grounding, you're absorbing electrons directly. So
Right.
you're not even depending on other substances to replenish. Like you're depending on reducing agents like NADPH that's produced in the body to reduce things like glutathione or to oxidize it, uh, to
Hmm.
oxidize things like glutathione for amelioration of oxidation happening in the body or anything oxidative damage. You're actually absorbing electrons directly at the source.
Right.
So when
Oh,
people,
that's cool.
yeah, when you talk about antioxidants in food, it's like, okay, well, who's to say that there's even a requirement for antioxidants in food? There's, first of all, there
Yeah.
are some in a carnivore diet. You've still got some vitamin C, you've got vitamin E,
Hmm.
but you've
Yep.
also, I mean, what if you're grounding continuously all day? It doesn't even have to be all day. Think about that. Do it for an hour. I mean,
Yep.
because I mean, if they're going to protect, if their logic is, well, if you eat antioxidants, they'll really help with regulating oxidative damage, free radicals.
Hmm.
Well, you're not eating continuously every day, so you can't criticize the carnivore or a carnivore lifestyle that involves grounding for only deriving antioxidants, electrons for an hour. If
Right.
you're saying that you should be eating eating
Antioxidants.
antioxidants, yeah, eating
Yeah.
antioxidants because you're not eating 24/7 either. So I mean,
Right.
unless you're vegan and maybe you'll get close enough to that, or you're eating every 3 hours or so, or every hour. But
Right. So let's go the other direction. Um, I am Irish, Scottish, German, and Italian.
okay.
I'm a fair-skinned redhead. Never have I ever been able to stay in the sun for more than like 30 minutes, 45 minutes max without turning into a lobster.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. Now, since I have been strict carnivore, this is the first summer that it kind of dawned on me. But on 5 different occasions out here in Las Vegas, the high desert, I have tried on 5 different occasions this summer to sunburn, and I can't.
Wow. Huh.
And we're talking in the sun, no shirt, no sunscreen
Yep.
for like 4 hours at a time, 4 to 5 hours at a time.
Yeah, that's impressive. Definitely.
I mean,
That's something
so
that's tough to ignore as well. It's another association, right? But that's tough to ignore.
right.
It's very tough to ignore. That is a very, very, very common anecdote too. Very common. The lack of even an ability to sunburn in the sun.
Right.
What'll happen
Yep.
is if you even get the slightest bit of irritation, it will immediately turn into a tan within like the next 24 hours.
Yep. Yep.
And it's there's a lot of mechanisms that are hypothesized to be at play there. Most of them involve seed oils because putting aside
Mhm.
carnivore, I see that anecdote happen when people cut out seed oils. They don't do anything else. They cut out seed
Right.
oils, and typically as a result of that, they're cutting out a lot of other ultra processed foods. Sure, so include those
Yep.
two and all the associated factors there. They're eating whole foods, right? Fruits,
Yep.
vegetables, fish, chicken, meat, like all that stuff, eggs, water. And what they'll see is if they
Hmm.
cut out anything that had seed oils in it, there's just a complete amelioration
Right.
of their of sunburning, basically. And
Yep.
that seems to implicate omega-6 fats or oxidation products in the first place. I think
Right.
more broadly, it's just a reduction of overall systemic inflammation. Your propensity for
Okay.
developing inflammatory conditions, anything characterized by inflammation, which is just a pre-programmed response that occurs in the body when it has perceived damage to tissues or experiences it, or a potential invading pathogen. It's a line that I recycle all the time.
Right.
If you keep that in mind, then anything that involves inflammation, you know that there's either a potential invading pathogen, or um, there's damage to tissues. So if you're
Right.
dealing with a sunburn, well, there's damage to tissues right there because the
Yep.
sun does have influence over damage to DNA. Absolutely. The
Hmm.
problem is pretending like it's the sole factor that you need to eliminate if you're trying to hedge against skin cancer, for example.
Hmm.
Yeah, it has influence over DNA damage, but what if there's a counter influence that you can remove
Right.
or actually
Yep.
introduce by removing something like seed oils and all
Hmm.
these other things that are raising your propensity to
Hmm.
developing skin cancer, maybe, or sunburns in this case, which is almost a microcosmic version of damage to skin, I mean, if you do that, then who's to say? Because it's silly to say that the sun is the actual primary problem and the thing that should be mitigated. It's very, very
Right.
the thing that gives the ability for life to even exist on Earth. Like, you really think that, oh, it's just designed to provide us with a general amount of warmth, for the ability for life
Right.
to exist. It's like, no, it's a little deeper than that, actually. We were exposed to it. We didn't live in the shade.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I've seen that anecdote like incessantly. It's continuous that I hear this anecdote, and it's very interesting, very intriguing. I would like to. I'm not a scientist yet. I'd like to research it myself eventually, and I can always trust myself to responsibly report the results that I find as well. So that'll help too. But I am
I
curious to look into it. Yeah.
I would love to hear about that. Um, and the same thing. Do you think that there's any association the between this war on cholesterol and the way that the sun interacts with cholesterol? This is what I've learned so far. The sun interacts with cholesterol via our skin cells to produce vitamin D.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have I don't think I've ever met anybody who got their last blood panel and said that my vitamin D is not deficient.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that there's an association between this war on cholesterol, us being inside immensely more than than we've evolved to be typically, and vitamin D deficiency across our population in general?
I do. I do think that.
Yeah.
I think there's many factors at play there, especially staying indoors all the time. This is one that, I mean, at least the overall general health space can get around no matter what side you're on dietarily. Like people need to go
Hmm.
outside and be less sedentary, I think.
Right.
Given my situation, well, I say I have no choice. I have a choice. I still go outside actually relatively regularly. I'm trying to especially do it even more frequently now that the summer is about to end. But in terms of like exercise and all that stuff, I have really bad EDS, so we're fixing it, but that's not
Hmm.
it's not something I can do now. But with respect to just going outside,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think people really need to do that. And if you're not used to sunlight, I think no matter how healthy your diet is, if you haven't seen the light of day in like years, of course
Hmm.
moderate it. Like as soon as you start feeling that like
Oh
you're
yeah.
hurting, like okay, go inside because eventually it only takes, especially if your diet is like a carnivorous style diet. I actually dealt with this with experience from experience. It took only a matter of days, like less than a week for me to get used to it. I just had to wait like
Yeah.
a few days, like okay, 15 minutes even. It was like
Hmm.
ow, man. Yeah, okay, I'm not used to that. But then
Yep.
you phenotypically adapt. That's what a tan is. I mean, that's what you're doing.
Right.
You're increasing melanin. But yeah, cholesterol is deeply intertwined. It's involved in vitamin D synthesis, which I'm actually curious. I'm not sure. I could probably find this out with just a quick little search. If vitamin D is involved directly in the melanin production process, because if it is,
Mm.
well then. I mean, then if you do have less cholesterol in your cell membranes,
Right.
then of course you
Yep.
always have to have some. You always have to have some, or else the cells will just fall apart. But
Right.
who's to say that the amount that's in there that's required just to keep the cells together is the amount that the body actually deems to be the most appropriate if you were actually consuming it regularly and giving it the
Right.
to synthesize its own um, in the liver. So that's also another. If that is true, then that's definitely going to be another mechanism as to how, because then it would explain the reduction in seed oils might not actually be the thing that's hedging against sunburn. It might be what it's being replaced with, which is animal fat and cholesterol.
Right.
That
Yep.
could be the other thing. There's multiple influential factors there. So
Huh. Interesting.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to talk about severe autoimmune transitioning
Okay.
to carnivore. Um, would that kind of fall in the same vein as as pregnant women, just stretching out that transition? I understand that through Coach Peter, bringing this to the forefront, every client is unique. Every
Mhm.
different person that we work with is very circumstantial based on their unique variables. So when it comes to when it comes to autoimmune, um, especially with severe autoimmune, would you it would just be a slower transition in that process?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best. Slow and steady wins the race, as they say.
Hmm.
But I would also look into, are you talking about specifically people that have autoimmune issues before embarking upon a carnivore diet, or are you talking about people that
Yes.
develop them while transitioning? Because I've never heard of the latter, although I'm not going to deny that that could be the case, but or that could happen. But if you're talking, okay, if you're talking about the former, then yeah, I think slow and steady. And people that have extreme metabolic problems, it depends on the metabolic problem. Because sometimes I think
Right.
that maybe depending on the metabolic problem, you might want to just go cold turkey. Like I've seen actually people that benefit from doing that. Um,
Hmm.
but I think that in the case where someone it might still be debilitating, absolutely. However, is it
Hmm.
debilitating enough that it would require you to embark upon the diet over the course of like 2 days? If not, well, then you
Right.
might want to, just for the sake of your own well-being and sanity, do it for,
Hmm.
6 to 8 weeks, maybe even longer, maybe even longer. Who's to say?
Right.
I think, yeah, slow and steady is typically the answer that I give. Most of the time when people, there was this, there's this World Carnivore Month was this like sort of, um, it was this, what's a word to use? It was this, um, I got a word in my brain and I can't find it. retaliatory. It's a retaliatory sort of trend towards the
Okay.
world. I can't, it was like World Vegan Month. I don't even know. It was like Veganuary or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
It
right.
was it was that. It was this retaliatory, like, okay, no. January is World Carnivore Month. I saw this posted, I think it was on Sean Baker's page. And I
Okay.
immediately went into the comments, and this wasn't towards Sean Baker, but I was like, I said to everyone in the comments, I said, guys, if you're planning on switching your diet overnight, January 1st,
Yeah.
do not do that. Like, don't.
Right.
It was starting to be promoted like right around New Year's, and I went, "Oh, well, no," because then what you're going to do is you're actually going to ruin the perception of the carnivore approach, because people
Correct.
they're gonna embark upon that diet, they're going to adopt it, and then within a matter of like 2 days, maybe they're going to have like
Yep.
brain fog and headache. I dealt with a friend like this actually. If he did it slowly, it didn't give him problems. But he did it like overnight, and he was like,
Yep.
"Bro, I feel like I'm gonna pass out." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, don't like have some rice for a minute, and then like let's reconsider. Like let's start
Right.
over again.
Yep.
Let's fix this because you can't do like you might be able to push through it. You very well might, but is that good to do? I mean, like I don't know. I mean, maybe if you
I
want
mean,
to, go ahead, go ahead.
for anybody that has tried to cut pre-workout energy drinks or coffee cold
Oh
turkey
yeah.
and gone through a caffeine withdrawal, I used to be a very heavy coffee drinker.
Yeah.
And caffeine withdrawal headaches are terrible. Every time you stand up, you feel like it's going to explode.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Just it's wild. So yeah, anybody that anybody that's talking about transitioning to carnivore overnight, don't.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Listen to Nathan here.
it's no good. I I personally have known two people that have transitioned overnight that haven't had any deleterious side effects, that
Mhm.
haven't had any wild repercussions. One of them was my 17-year-old niece that had not done 30 years of damage to her body through
Yeah.
oxalates
That
and
helps.
plant toxins and whatnot.
Yep.
Um,
That helps.
and but even another one was a friend of mine that I work with, and he's in his mid 20s and was able to make that transition. But he was healthy, fit, took relatively good care of himself. Um, but yeah, but overall, I would say above above a pretty big percentile across the board. A cold turkey transition just is extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I
It's
said, you could very well, I mean, I don't think it's going to kill you to push through it, but it's not going to,
correct.
you're not, I don't think that's a good way of starting your relationship with the diet.
Right.
It's going to start off that tumultuous. You're probably going to just have even if they're unconscious, you're going to have some ill feelings towards towards it, like, oh, maybe I'm not doing the
Hmm.
right thing, maybe I'm unless afterwards you just feel the best you've ever felt in your life, and then sure,
Right.
as a general idea, as a general protocol, it's like, oh, you might as well just be safe with it, like
Hmm.
6 to 8 weeks in the grand scheme of things, if you're gonna take that and divide it by the entire lifespan of the individual, yeah, it's not really
Right.
that long, is it?
No, no, it's
Yeah.
a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Um, Internal biomes versus external biomes. Now we transition slowly to give our gut microbiome and everything a chance to slowly transition with us,
Mhm.
to avoid some of those adverse effects. And in your book, when it comes to the external biome, you had referenced that our skin absorbs anything that we put on it.
Yeah.
Is 65%, and in other cases, depending on what it is, will absorb up to 100%,
Hmm.
especially around the groin area and under the arms.
Under the arms, yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm logically, I would assume that in these regions, specifically where we sweat, where bacteria grows, where we excrete toxins or excrete our pheromones, we have our glands. We create an external biome in those regions?
Uh, that's not something that I'm particularly aware of. I haven't looked too much into it.
Okay. Hmm.
Um, but I think that the major problem is actually the internal more than the external in that regard. Because
Okay.
whenever you're absorbing, most of the things, if you absorb it through the skin, it's not having an immediate um, adverse effect on the surface level of the skin. It's usually whenever it gets absorbed into the bloodstream and then it starts interfering with more intimate, it starts interfering more intimately with intricate parts of the physiological system at large, like the chemistry.
Okay.
Um, Exterior wise, I think the skin is pretty good at withstanding a lot, because we were exposed to a lot. We still are exposed to a lot externally, and it's designed
Right.
to sort of be able to regulate against that and be a bulwark against it, be quite fortitudinous in that regard. So I think it's more of a problem internally than externally, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't possibly be a problem externally because we have bacteria all over our bodies.
Correct.
So it's something I have to look into. I'm not exactly aware of it, but I don't think that it's something to be written off completely. I think
Okay.
people would be I'd be remiss if I actually did that.
Right.
If I completely dismissed it. But yes, usually like when you're talking about for the gut, for example, you're talking about trillions of bacteria that all have
Right.
so like serotonin production and many other like even just direct hormones and stuff. So
Hmm.
that's more intimate than it is in the external environment. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one thing that I have noticed is my body odor went away.
Uh-huh.
My
Yeah. Okay.
it's
That's a good point.
wild. So maybe that's an excretion of toxins or some
Yeah.
form of oxalate dumping, but maybe with something else.
Well, if by external environment you meant like under the arms, for example, that's actually
Hmm.
I would almost think of that as like an external internal environment because
Yep.
it's under the arm. So then it would be then I feel like that's actually a little different because then I would change my answer and say absolutely I feel like that would depending on what you eat. Yeah, and you know what? You know what? I think that you're right. I think it is an excretion thing more than it is sort of a natural cultivation in the area, depending on what you're putting in or what you're
Mm,
putting into the body and also onto the body. Because,
yeah.
for example, I actually hear people, they have worsened body odor when they consume garlic or like garlic powder or onion
Hmm.
powder.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's like, well, that tells me, well, you didn't apply it to your armpits. So if it's
Right.
there, then it's clearly being excreted through the skin.
Yep.
So that tells me you're on the right track there. And I forgot about that because if I hadn't forgotten about it, I would have said that. Because yeah, that's part of the external environment. It's just almost like a mini internal environment on the external
Right.
side. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So in that case, yeah. I think that you're right. You're on the right track. Definitely what you eat can cultivate that or change the environment there.
Yeah. I mean, as far as talking points and whatnot, that's about it. I mean, we could really dive into some stuff, but it's
Oh, yeah.
we'll be here all night.
Yeah, no, I think that it's a good idea to schedule another call because if we have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure that we do, I think that it would benefit both of us and also the viewers if we had another conversation because you know
Absolutely.
why would we silo the conversation and isolate it to ourselves. You know, like, why would we do
Yeah.
that when we could? But yeah, no, this is good. There's a lot of good stuff. I think that we've covered a lot of important points that will help a lot of people. And that's why we do what we do, isn't it? So
That's why we do it. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I mean, it was a very productive conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly,
I
and
enjoyed it. Yes.
I look forward to our future conversations. Like I said, if you have any other topics to talk about, you can get a hold of me. We can schedule the next consultation right after this if you'd like. Like we can definitely do that. I will make time available because these conversations are important. And I don't think that there's as many people, and this goes for all spaces. I don't think there's as many people that respect nuance like we seem to, and that's important.
Yeah.
Very
I
important.
I I I love it. I love the nuance. I love the semantics, the getting into the real nitty-gritty of knowing the mechanisms behind what's doing this.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the club because
Yeah,
it's exactly how I think too. But yeah, well, again, I enjoyed talking to you, and we'll talk again soon.
I love it. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Yep.
See you.